Hello, and thank you all for joining us on Guests and Gusto. This is SCAD's virtual series of conversations with digital content that we invite the creators and innovators making and redefining our culture to join us. I am Michael James O'Brien, the Associate Chair of Photography at SCAD, and today I'm more than happy to welcome our special guests, Arnika Dawkins and Irvin Johnson. Arnika is both a photographer and a collector, as well as the director of the Arnika Dawkins Gallery, which she founded in 2012 after completing her M.A. in photography at SCAD in 2009. She's produced programs in Los Angeles, Washington, D.C., Miami, and New York City, among many other places, in addition to her base here in Atlanta. Her program specializes in work by both emerging and established artists who are African American.
Okay, if I take a break.
Irvin Johnson received his M.F.A. from SCAD in photography in 2015. Since then, he's had several important residencies and numerous exhibitions, including the European Cultural Center at the 2019 Venice Biennale. His work is currently on exhibition at the Dawkins Gallery, and SCAD, I'm happy to say, will present his photographic mixed media series at Photo London, which is one of the most important international photo exhibitions, and this opens online on October 7th. Stay tuned for that. Today, we're going to discuss several of Irvin's series dating back from when he was a student up until the present. These were created in response to the Black Lives Matter movement, many of them, and pay homage to the lives lost to racism and police brutality. The work engages us all in a critical dialogue on how the perception of Blackness is often seen as monolithic. Together, Arnika and Irvin are going to share with us how their professional relationship has grown over the years and how this relationship elevates and celebrates the artist's work. And now I'd like to ask Alex Sachs, our director of SCAD Museums in Atlanta, to tell you about today's poll question.
Hi. So for a chance to win a tote bag and a journal created by a SCAD alum, we'd love to have your response to the following question. So today, Irvin's going to talk predominantly about his project #InHonor, but which of his other projects would you like to hear more about? So please just indicate, either Unholy, Project Genesis, or Treasured, and then I will let you know towards the end of the presentation which one you all chose. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. Okay, I would like at this point to turn the screen and the floor over to Arnika Dawkins. After the conversation, we'll have some time to ask Arnika and Irvin either questions about their program, about their individual practices, or how they managed to work together with the challenges that we're all facing in the cultural and political climate that we are currently living through, let's just say. Arnika, welcome.
Thank you so much, Michael. It's such a pleasure to be with you and your colleagues and students today, as well as the star of the day, Ervin A. Johnson. I am a proud SCAD alum and was part of the first class here in Atlanta, Georgia. I studied digital photography, and I just wanted to first thank you guys for having us today. It's a real treat. SCAD means a lot to me. I've had so much great benefit from it. So when I saw on Interstate 75 the sign that went up on the side of the building that said SCAD, I was wondering what it was, and I investigated further and discovered that I could apply and thought I would do something that I was passionate about, which was photography. I was glad to have been accepted. I thought it was going to be digital photography. As it turned out, the first thing on my syllabus, and Professor Turk can acknowledge this, was large format photography. And my thought was, hey, wait, I'm interested in digital photography. And they said, well, Ms. Dawkins, you'll need to reapply. And I did, and I got my syllabus again. And the first thing on the syllabus again was large format photography. And so I thought that was kind of instructive early on, because I thought SCAD was going to teach me how to make the best, amazing image that I could possibly create. And what I learned was SCAD was helping me come up with conceptual ideation about what it is that I had to say with the medium. After getting my master's, which was a real treat, and being part of the guinea pig class, the first one, I had a few decisions to make. Like, what am I going to do with this newly minted degree? I knew I could be a photographer. SCAD had prepared me to do that. I knew I could work at a gallery, or I could own a gallery. I did some internship work at an amazing local gallery, and just fell in love with the idea of working with artists, with holding the work of artists that I had read about, studied about in the history of photography while at SCAD, talking to people that wanted to live with this work, whether it's in their office or in their home, collectors. And I just knew that that's what I wanted to do. So as a start, in 2012, I started Arnika Dawkins Gallery. I put my name behind the gallery because I determined, as a photographer and a collector, I was only going to show work that I myself would invest in or collect. So it's been a wonderful journey. I intentionally have kept my roster fairly small, because I think that I have two sets of clients. I have the folks that are buying and consuming the art, but the artists are also my clients. I really want to make them happy and have their work seen by a wider audience. And I figure that's the only way that someone can consume the work. They have to see it. And so I do the best that I can to represent them and show their work in the best light. I know I rambled a little bit, Michael, but that's kind of how I came to be at Arnika Dawkins Gallery. I'll just add, we do 2 to 3 exhibitions annually physically prior to the pandemic. We travel with the work because the gallery is located in a residential area. I just made a commitment that I knew that I would take the work to the people. I wouldn't anticipate that they would always find me. So we do art fairs. We have done exhibitions in other cities around the country, and it's a real honor and privilege for me to work with the artists that I work with.
That's a great intro, Arnika. Before we turn over the screen to one of your star artists, I want to ask you, how often would you say you take on, this is going to be probably a question that will come up, and you can give it whatever way you want to spin it, but to take new artists, finding them. How many artists, for example, currently do you represent, as opposed to how many you exhibit, would you say?
So representation to me is a little different than showing and showing the work. So we have come up with a process where maybe we will show the work in an exhibition, and maybe a group exhibition, and how things go there, then we will make a even deeper relationship. So we just have a handful of folks on our roster and have had the privilege to show work, and just the idea is that it evolves into a deeper relationship. We're always open to finding, the new rising star like Ervin A. Johnson and Leandra Lesor, some fellow SCAD grads. And it's just a real privilege to find those rising stars, and a real feather in our cap when we have an opportunity to work with those types of artists.
One other question before we move on quickly. And I know this is complicated. How do you, in your own instinctual looking at work, balance the two issues that we all have to deal with, the creative and a commercial?
The
Do you have a
creative and
formula for that? Well, you have to sell work. I
so
know that to stay afloat. And
I
you
think
have
I
instinct, I'm
understand.
sure you love work. So is there a way to balance that, or is it just something instinctual, Arnika?
So it is partly instinctual, but I made a decision. As I mentioned to you, I opened the gallery about 8 years ago. So I wasn't a spring chicken when I started the gallery. I decided that my mustard seed test, the reason why I was going to show any work at all, was that I myself would buy it. And it's just kind of simple. If I would buy it and hang it on a wall, like my name's on this gallery, then I will likely show it. There are other galleries that make other decisions and have other processes that work great for them. It is just for me, when I'm talking about the work, I want to have engaged my head, heart, and mind, in the work. And it's just, I don't know. It's just a decision that I made, and it may not be what other galleries choose to do, but it works for me.
That's fantastic. Great answer. Now I think we're ready to turn over the screen to Irvin Johnson, who's going to show us a series of photographs he's done and talk a little bit about them, and then we'll swing back and talk about how the two of you formulated your relationship. Irvin, are you up?
Yes. Hi, everyone. 1 second.
Hi, Irvin. We're doing a little high-tech screen share here. Beautiful. Scroll up because you're not at the top. Yeah, there you go. Fantastic.
All right.
Right.
So this is the image that has impacted my life so immensely. My journey as an artist began in my final semester as an undergrad at the University of Illinois. At the time, I was studying English with a concentration on queer Black literature and the notion of passing. In one class in which we were discussing the perception of queer bodies, a professor introduced us to Robert Mapplethorpe's work. Having recently come out and dealing with all of that encompasses that, I found that this image was incredibly disturbing for me. Mapplethorpe's work has come to represent the misrepresentation and visual theft of Black bodies that has occurred for hundreds of years. In many photographs, the men featured seem to lack humanity for me. And in his photographs, we become objects, things to be admired and owned. In that same class, we were also introduced to Isaac Julian's Looking for Langston. I remember that day so vividly because at 21, I had for the first time seen an image that reflected back to me the type of man I was and would become, but hadn't yet given myself permission to be. There was a beautiful softness to Julian's work, a safe space that he crafted for these Black men that I was very interested in visually. For years, I had this notion reinforced to me that I couldn't exist as I was, and yet here these men were confident, beautiful, and soft. This film forever shifted my direction and sense of self, planting the seeds for me to evolve as an artist and as a person. I went home that weekend and borrowed a family member's camera to make some photos of my friends, photos that would reflect back to me myself, just as Julian's did. So after that, I completed my first bachelor's in English in 2010 and immediately enrolled in the photo program at Columbia College in Chicago. During my first semester, I took the required Black and white film class and completed my first photo series entitled Melt, and this is a selection from that. This series explores and also dispels notions of masculinity that I had groomed myself to accept. And here's another selection from that. So while exploring with the medium, I quickly learned that I was interested in doing more with it. A fellow classmate in a portrait class being led by Dawood Bey was using acrylics to enhance her work. And I wondered what would happen if I introduced acrylics to my photographs. I did it, and this is one of the first experiments that I had. This series is called Renegotiated Spaces. It was my final series produced at Columbia College. And I see them today as early explorations that began to lay the framework for what would evolve, for what my work would evolve into later. I spent weeks and eventually years experimenting and creating new techniques and processes that informed and spoke to the work. For me, paint has become a stand-in for metaphor, making the invisible tangible. And here's another selection from that series. So then, after graduating from Columbia in 2012, I realized that I needed more time and I hadn't really fully fleshed out my ideas and wanted to spend more time in exploring and making new work. So I applied to several graduate programs and was accepted into SCAD, yay. And I started in fall of 2012, and this was the first, this is called Treasured. This is the first series I produced. This series and the next three that I'm going to show are explorations of my queer Black identity. And again, like I said, the notions that I had accepted but wanted to dispel for myself. I really started to experiment with acetone and different paper types to try to just renegotiate the image and the space around the person.
There's a photo, they're photo-based, aren't they, Irvin?
Everything is photo-based.
Yeah, with mixed material. Okay, go ahead.
This is from the series Unholy, exploring my relationship to Christianity. I had been in Christian and Catholic schools from kindergarten up until high school, so I had lots of mixed feelings about spirituality and Christianity, and so this was just a series I made to explore that. And this is Project Genesis. This was my thesis work completed at SCAD. It is a original mythology based on several creation myths, and it's multimedia. So these are 42 by 56 photo-based mixed media prints. I have a book I created, scrolls, a sacred text, and video to accompany this work. And so right around 2014, I think, in the summer of 2014, right before returning to campus for my final year of studies, Trayvon Martin was assassinated. That summer was one filled with static for myself and for every Black person. This type of systematic erasure of life is not a new notion, and so for myself personally, I remembered feeling numb. My friends and family were quick to act, attending marches and rallies. We all tuned in collectively to the televised court case, hoping for some semblance of justice. I stood still. I did not attend the marches. I did not protest. I saw no point in adding my voice to a collective. It felt pointless. At the conclusion of the trial, my mother came and stood in the doorway of my childhood bedroom and stared at me for a few moments. She had been crying because of the verdict, and we exchanged weary looks, and she left. The next morning, we discussed the moment. She told me that the case for her triggered her fears for her children. For me, her youngest, her son, a Black queer man, who she could do nothing to protect. Despite her best efforts, and that floored me. For days, I would watch her watching me in silence. I returned to school with a spark of inspiration. I wanted to honor my people as they were and give them their flowers now, while paying homage to the past and to our constant ability to surmount the always impossible odds placed at our feet. So I created #InHonor, a series of large-scale photo-based mixed media portraits. The hashtag is a nod to where I want the work to live. The internet has done a very great well-being and constant growth to the Black Lives Matter movement. I wanted to add to that world visually. Another important aspect of an honor is that it must live both inside and outside of traditional art spaces. I wanted to bring that work to those for whom it was made. So this is #InHonor's first iteration. These are the actual first two that I created in, I believe it was 2015 of January. I did an open call at the Atlanta portrait studio at SCAD on the 5th floor. And I invited people to come and sit for the portraits and discuss just their feelings about being Black and everything that was going on. And so, like I said, another important aspect of the work is that it live outside of traditional gallery spaces. So I had a friend who was studying graphic design, so Derek Mixon, create these posters for me, and we went out into Krog Street and posted them.
Did you record those conversations, Irvin?
Not initially. It's something that I'm interested in now, though. This is an installation from Montessori College. They actually reached out to me and asked if they could do an installation of the posters also, which I thought was very cool. This is an installation I completed at Chicago at the West Side Justice Center. These are very large. I think they're 70 by 200 or something. So they gave me permission to do whatever I wanted to on this outside wall. So I included some texts that I had written maybe I think a year ago before this and installed these, and they were up for about a year. This is the second iteration of In Honor. The ways in which I work changed. I had lost access to those large scale printers that you guys get to enjoy at SCAD. So
Pay
I had to
attention, students, to that. It affects the work you do, but these are amazing, amazing, Irvin.
Thank you, Michael. So I had to figure out a way to continue to make large work, but on a artist budget. So I printed out 4x6s, cropped them in Photoshop, and then sent them out to Walgreens to be printed, and then did the collaging at home. These actually exist in the mayor's office in Atlanta. And this is another installation that I got to do at Columbia College in 2016. It was a summer residency. And on the back wall is a stream of consciousness that I wrote on the first day of that residency. This is an installation at SCAD. Michael, I don't know if you remember the young woman who did the mural work behind. You remember her name?
I don't actually, sorry to say. She's great. They're great.
Yeah, I can't remember her name, but her work also involves conversations about things that are happening on the streets of Atlanta. So I thought that the two spoke very well to each other. This was 2018, I think.
2018, and it was for Open Studio. When you got off the elevator, this is what you saw. It was a mesmerizing installation. And I think the combination of the wildness of these portraits and the sort of controlled background, it integrates, sorry, that word, it brings together the work that you've done, the way you've done it, and that kind of street dimension to your work, and then this sort of sense of structure and grid-like work from the background. It was a great collaboration, kind of remote collaboration, let's put it that way. But it worked out really well. It's an amazing story.
This is the third iteration of In Honor. It was entitled In Honor Monoliths. So with this work, I was interested in the idea of Blackness being seen as this monolithic thing. And I wondered how to create things that would speak to that visually. So what I did was start to collage different faces together. On the left, the collaging was done digitally, and then done, what's the word? I guess in person. And on the right, it's more of a organic type of feel. So I actually took multiple prints and collaged them in that way. This work was completed at the Center for Photography at Woodstock in New York. And then I had an exhibition immediately following that in 2018 at Arnika Dawkins Gallery. And this is an installation of a stream of consciousness that I did in the portfolio room. Which brings us to the most current iteration of In Honor, variations on a theme. These are collages still printed on cotton and renegotiated in the same ways that the other work is. I use solvents, glitter, acrylic inks, And yeah, I'm just really getting started into this work. An honor is never ending. The work will continue to be produced as my understanding of my Blackness evolves.
That's great, Irvin. Is that the last of the work you want to share with us right now?
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. We have so many questions, but I think that what I'd like to do is turn over the screen to both you and Arnika. And one of the things that occurs to me from looking at this work is, first of all, I want to talk about, or you to talk about, how your relationship started and how it evolved. Someone we talked to, Alex and I earlier today, compared these collaborations to a marriage with all the ups and downs. So anything you want to say in either direction. Another thing I'm very interested in, Arnika, is how you represent work that has a physical, political street dimension. I think that's very interesting to see the manifestations of Irvin's work on the street, and something we're talking about now at SCAD, because we have a collaboration, as you know, with Carrie Mae Weems, and she's done very large installations all over Atlanta. And so using art as a platform for change is so important, but then you have the gallery dimension. So that's a lot of questions I'm just throwing at you, but we'd love to hear how you work together. And if you can just give us an idea that a lot of my students are going to want to know how I get to go to a gallery, how can I meet a gallerist? And, you know, so anything like that that will give us a sense of how your relationship strengthened over these years.
Wow, that's a lot. And I hope I'll get to that answer to that question. But I'll just start out with how I had the privilege and the pleasure of meeting Irvin. And it was through this idea of networking. I had an amazing colleague, intern, artist that I had invited to work with me, Leandra Lasore, and I showed her work in an exhibition titled On Being Black. And then a little bit to the answer to your question about these political statements. I mean, Blackness in this current time, and has been for my lifetime, political. And it's something that I'm keenly interested in. And so at the gallery, I'm showing what I'm interested in. So Leandra, I showed her work in an exhibition titled On Being Black there were 22 artists, age range 22 years old to 80 years old. And everyone was commenting on being Black, whatever that meant to them. Leandra then interned with me and had an amazing work ethic, and just anything that she said, I just held on to with everything I had. And she said, Arnika, you should meet this guy by the name of Irvin Johnson. She didn't put the A in there. She said Irvin Johnson. And I'm like, okay. And, you know, during the time she'd say, you need to meet Irvin. You need to meet Irvin. So another fellow SCAD alum, Shakara Marcus, was having her thesis exhibition here at the gallery, and everybody was in and enjoying the work, and we were busy, and Leandra said, oh, Irvin just left. And I'm like, she ran out to get him and said, okay, Arnika, this is Irvin. Irvin, this is Arnika. I'm like, hi there, how are you? I've heard a lot about you. And Irvin went, whoo, and he dashed off. But there's two sides to every story, right? Two sides to every story. You're muted, Irvin, I think.
Oh, am I?
Oh, okay.
You're
so,
welcome.
you know, I then asked Irvin to have his work in that same exhibition on being Black. One of the first images that he showed you, that when he kicked off #InHonor, we exhibited, and a patron came by the next day, or maybe that Monday. And literally, we stood there for 30 minutes or so, or I don't know if I ever told you this, and talked about the work. I mean, that you can talk about work with someone for 30 minutes, a photograph, wow, wow. And, you know, he was one of the first collectors of your work, and I'm thrilled by that. So that's my version of how we met. What's yours?
I don't remember running out. If I did, it's probably because I was nervous, like I always am. Uh, I remember attending Shakara's thesis show, and yeah, we met. I left, and then actually Michael had just started at SCAD. I was talking to him about an honor, and I was showing him the work. He was like, you should really connect with Arnika. You should send an email to her. And just show her the work and ask her what she thinks about it. And so I sent the email, and you replied, I think within an hour, with an invitation to be to be a part of the exhibition. And I remember running through my apartment screaming, because it was my first invitation to be a part of an exhibition, and so yeah.
Well, that's so interesting because I never knew that Michael was also a connector. So thank you for that, Michael. This MJO, this is great. This is great to know. Yes, that exhibition was, I think, collectively made a statement that I'm really still proud of to this day. Deb Willis was in that exhibition. Hank Willis Thomas was in that exhibition. A recent RISD grad at 22 was in that exhibition. And that's one of the things that I think is really important. I mean, it's great to make great work, but to make great work that speaks and has something to say is really what fuels me. And so, Michael, to answer your question about this commercial part of it versus the political part of it, I think when work has something important to say, the commercial part of it comes along with that. I mean, it should be a given that technically it's sound, that compositionally, it works, that aesthetically it's pleasing, but that the work has something to say, that this work speaks for someone when they're not there to speak for themselves, or, the fact that you have to explain it, that could be great, but for commercial sense, for someone to decide to pay an artist, pay a framer to live with it, I think it has to keep on giving. So Irvin, I have a question for you. What had you thought about with regard to your work? When you said Michael suggested you should reach out to me, and had you thought about gallery representation? Had you thought about having your work in gallery settings? And then what was that process of you choosing to go that route?
I knew that I wanted to be a fine art photographer. But there wasn't really a lot of information out there about how you go about doing that, and the ways.
I think it's a well-kept secret. It's a secret.
I think so too. I think we should go out and talk to people about it. It was just a trial and error. I think I talked to a lot of my professors about what I should do, and I have to say, after attending 3 different colleges and graduating from all of them, SCAD was the best. Everyone at SCAD really had a lot of information to give me about how to go about becoming a part of this world. And I knew, like I said earlier on, that I wanted to be a fine art photographer. I knew that a part of that could be gallery representation, that was something that I was interested in. But like I said, there really isn't a manual about how you go about to, achieve that.
You're right. And, I joked about it's a secret. I remember being at SCAD, and like I said, I got my newly minted degree, and I'm like, so now what? So now what am I supposed to do? And so this idea of gallery representation, is as individual as the artist as well as the gallerist. Each gallery has its own programming, but I use this as an analogy all the time. You wouldn't go to Victoria's Secret to buy a pair of men's shoes, right? And so each one has its own kind of identity, so to speak, about what it is that they're showing. And so the fact that we found one another, I think, has been great. I think that we're just getting started. We have a lot to do.
I agree.
That's great. I wanted to ask, no, that's a wonderful place to stop for a second, ask you something that you mentioned about, it's about meeting people in person, the way that happens. And I made the analogy earlier about marriage. Every situation, every portrait you've done, and every relationship, how they grow, there is no formula, but you have a good analogy. I sometimes tell my students, if you're a fashion photographer, you probably don't send your pictures by email to Road and Stream or whatever that, and there's a way that you have to and analyze the platforms. We have too many platforms right now. And I think there is a sense that if you just send a blanket of emails to every single person that you can get, that someone's going to say, I love your work, I'm going to give you a show at the Modern. It doesn't work that way. And I think that if we could say, I'm going to ask a question, a little bit of two questions. One, I want to come into a second about any changes, any of the challenge of represent Blackness. If that's changing, we certainly are in a revved up political moment when these messages and encountering the invisibility that we've encountered for so many years. But my first question before that is to say, with the two of you, like many relationships, Irvin, were there moments in the creation of your work, including moving back to Chicago, coming down here, being with Arnika at various points, when you had, what were the moments when you thought you're stuck, and how do you overcome that when you move forward? What are the things that you turn to? I've discussed this with Leandra many times, and she's been very helpful, but were there moments in this period since 2015, 2016, not that long ago, when you're stuck and there's a dry spell?
Absolutely. Right after I finished, like I said, with that second iteration of In Honor, I was very stuck. I didn't have the large format cameras. I didn't have the printers, but there was interest in the work, and there was interest from me as an artist to create. So in that, you asked, well, I guess, how I pressed forward. I guess it was just, and this is kind of corny, but my mom is she instilled in me this persistence. And so she was like, well, you just have to figure out a way to do it. There is no stopping. You're an artist. You have to make this work. This is clearly what you've been sent here to do. So we have to figure out a way to do it. And so I can't argue with her. So that's what I did.
Well, there's an amazing moment. I don't know if you've seen the Nina Simone documentary that was made in France, when she talks about the civil rights movement, and that she said she was thinking of getting a gun. And she said, if one more person calls my mother auntie, I'm going to get a gun. And her husband said to her, the best thing you can do, Nina, is to do what you do. And the next cut you see in that movie is her singing We Shall Overcome with Martin Luther King. So I think the way that we move politically and how we make this message. And another reference, the great poet W.H. Auden, in an elegy that he wrote about William Butler Yeats, said, poetry makes nothing happen. It survives a way of happening, a mouth. And I wonder if you think what you're doing and how you present this work has that effect politically. We're not asking to change laws, or are we? And how the work that you present is in and of itself a statement of change, of political change. Does that make sense?
I want to comment on that.
Good.
I think artists, creatives are dialed to a different level of sensitivity. There are 7.3 billion people on the planet. Some are just zooming through, right? But I think artists in their creation are just kind of, maybe they have their ear, their heart to an issue. And that is what I think the art world loves and consumes. It's like important, impactful work. And it could be something as simple as a snapshot of whatever kind of beauty, whether it's a flower or a simple portrait or whatever it is. The fact that it was rendered in this vision of whoever was creating it is what fuels the fine art world, fuels gallerists, and people that are fuels collectors. So I hope that answered that question, but I just wanted to comment on that. And then in terms of how you navigate through this gallery thing, because it is a thing. I think what's really important is, the research and finding that great connection. I mean, the fact that I say the name of my gallery is Arnika Dawkins Gallery. When you put gallery behind the name, people were like, oh, hey, show my art. Hey, show my art. It's so amazing. Oftentimes I will get emails frequently. I'm an illustrator. Would you show my work? I paint. Would you show my work? That tells me that this person didn't even take the time to see what it is that I show. And again, that analogy, like you don't go to Victoria's Secret to buy men's athletic shoes. Like, it takes the homework. And then I think let me just say this and I'll be quiet, but I think it's also important for, if I were in a SCAD student's shoes, still in school, it's important to understand what that particular gallery, you find a gallery that you think your work is a good fit for, find out what their submission policy is. Oftentimes this gallery is not in M.F.A. So, we say, well, it's like cold calling. So I think, Michael, the approach that you had, it's tough. It's really tough, but you suggested to Irvin, maybe you should reach out to this person, like, making those introductions, like Leandra introduced me to Irvin's work as just a great example. I mean, that's I think a far better approach. Also, like portfolio reviews. Atlanta Celebrates Photography annually had portfolio reviews. Irvin is now a finalist for Critical Mass at Photolucida, their Center of Photography. I know these things can be expensive, but those are places where people who are looking for work are, and it's probably helpful to have that as a first place. And I think, last thing, I think that it's also super important. Everyone's in school and talking to your professors, but it's important and critical to talk about your work. And I think the more you talk about it, the more you hone what it is that you're providing to the art world.
I think also, Arnika, one of the things that we do, Alex Sachs does it, we work together on a lot of projects. And this is not a blanket recognition. All this work should go here and there. We know, and you used a phrase once in a different way, we know when it's cooked. And I'm not a cook, but I can tell when it's ready, we know where to go. It's wasting all of our time to send work to people when we think it's not quite there yet. Right. But the development of that, it's very, very important for us. So I know that when we mention the people to you, we know within a framework of where they are with that career. But then you have to move forward. I want to ask Alex, our leader here, yes. I have an incredible question that I would have asked it myself, except that Raheem White asked it. Can I go ahead and read this question, Alex? Are we ready for that?
Sure.
Okay, the question is, Irvin, where does your queerness and blackness meet? I hope you're ready for this. I think we all are. Do you feel that you're able to explore the intersectionality, that's the word, of these two identities in your work, and what kind of healing, well, let's just leave it with the intersectionality and the two identities, because I know you've explored them in the exhibition you did at Arnika's, where you wrote all over the wall, which is pretty amazing. I hope you're able to sell those walls, Arnika, because that was an incredible installation.
Okay. Where do they meet? And am I able to express intersectionality in this manner? I think for me, because I've had a similar question before, and I think the other person was wondering how my queerness affected my work, especially in honor, because it's not, I guess, readily visible in that. And I don't know, Raheem, if that's what you're getting at, or I do think that I'm able to explore the intersectionality of those two things, while they may not always be visible in the work, they're a part of me. Right. And to also answer the question about healing, because that is a major part of my work. My work is it's important to me to focus on healing while making the work, because can sometimes put you in a traumatic place or take you back to those kinds of places mentally. And for me, it's the act of making the thing, which I've been thinking a lot recently about alchemy, about Black people as alchemists and the many ways in which we transform not only ourselves, but things around us. And so for me, I am an alchemist, and when I'm making my work, I'm transforming not only myself, but the things inside of me that need to evolve.
Sometimes, Irvin, I think that the work doesn't have to be directly obvious about certain issues, and the fact that we create it and that it exists is already a certain kind of a statement. We have amazing commentaries. I want to mention one thing before anyone goes anywhere. It's from Rebecca, so I can find this very quickly. Variations on the theme is on view right now at the Arnika Dawkins Gallery, www.arnicadawkinsgallery.com. Viewing room. Is that right, Arnika?
That's correct.
You'll
Yes.
find it. So what next? What are the two of you planning? What would you like to have happen if you have a kind of fantasy together where the work to be positioned or recognized besides Photo London and SCAD and Arnika Dawkins?
As you say, onward.
I think so. Anything for you, Irvin? Any goals or feelings of how you've managed to get the work really seen a lot in a lot of open public space, which is amazing. Combination, which I was trying to get at, between someone's asked the question, I think they asked of Arnika about the balance between the commercial and the artistic. It came up earlier and we discussed it a little bit, but you know, that balance of where you'd like to see the work and where you feel it's going and the spaces that it inhabits, given the invisibility of a certain kind of work for such a long time. Do you have any idea where you'd like to see it?
I know I'd like to do a lot more work in public spaces. I'm very interested in installations. I've gotten back into my writing. I want to do a lot more of that. I know a book is coming up for me soon. I just feel that in the air. It's time for me to make a book.
Yeah, great. I can see it. Let me know. We're working with you. Arnika, I have a question for you, and then I have something else I want to ask. Arnika, this is from Andre Winter. What was the decision process of moving from behind the lens to being behind and representing artists who are taking photographs? That's a good question.
Andre, that's an excellent question. And initially and to this day, I think it was this idea of representation. I know as a photographer, as an artist, as a creative, that it's hard to get your work seen. And I think even more challenging if you are a person of color, because as I talked about this networking, sometimes we're not in those spaces where this network is going. So I saw a real need as a collector, as it's something that my husband and I have done for a while. It's something, you know, great artwork is what we like living with. And so I saw a need. I love being behind the camera, but the gallery has been my lens, or looking at the work that of the artists that we work with has been the lens that I've been viewing the world, and just love their conceptual impetus.
They might be great curators or people doing other kinds of catalog work. It's a good decision to make about incorporating photography. I have a question, Irvin, from Michaela Henry. Taking the alchemy metaphor further, how would you explain the concept of equal exchange in taking trauma and turning it into art?
I'm not sure I understand.
Well, alchemy is, you know, changing metal into gold, let's say, and it's a version probably of what you're doing. But actually, having said that, could you talk about the series you did where you did just that, where you put the gold lines around the collage work? Because that's based on something that's done in China. When things are broken, they put them back together with gold. So I think the process of converting trauma, which we are feeling on a daily basis, all of us, into works of art that don't cover over it. It's not a Band-Aid. But do you find that in your head you're converting that process, or is it just natural?
It's natural. I think it's an intrinsic ability for Black people. I think it's just what we're capable of because we've had to be. And I'm channeling my ability to do that through art. Does that answer the question?
Well, I think if you're talking about Black Lives Matter and Trans Lives Matter, the things that we're going through culturally, and you turn these into works of art, one of the things that impresses me, and I don't know if Arnika, this was your feeling, is that a friend of mine who bought some of the portraits, when I go to her house and I see them, I'm never tired of looking at these two faces peering out from her, all the things around. And something about what I tell my students often, when something is very, very specific, it has a tendency to equally be universal. And I think one of the things is when I look at your portraiture, I don't find myself thinking so much about that person. I think about that, but it's the overall effect of their presence in the world, in the process of turning lead into gold. And what artists do, even artists that aren't as challenged as trans and Black and queer artists who are queer, even other artists that don't have those, let's just say those concerns or those challenges, do that to a certain extent, the experience, changing it into something. And I think that one of the things with the portraits you've done, there's one behind Arnika's head that I can see in the room, that's beautiful from that series, that it feels to me like it's riveting in the sense that it's universal as well as being about an individual, which is what great portraiture does. Don't you think, Arnika?
Absolutely. I mean, people either with their, with what they're looking at, either they can reflect themselves in it, you know, maybe the humanity part of it, or perhaps it makes them pensive or think about something or feel something. I think that that's just really wonderful. That is photography that, or art that just keeps on giving.
That's great. Anything else? Any other questions? Alex, do you see some questions that you'd like to field from your, is Alana Johnson's your mother, right? Irvin? Well, there's an Alana Johnson on here that wants us to give a shout out to mothers everywhere. So let's just do that right now. We all had them, and some of us are them. So let me, and also there've been questions about the work for sale. And so, you know, I think we gave the link. Arnika is your link for that. We had great questions, a lot of comments, you know, amazing. I got goosebumps. Everyone else is holding back the tears, beautiful and inspiring work. So I think given what we talked about, is there anything, Arnika, I wanted to ask you one question very quickly. Do you see in the landscape of artists that you represent, this is going to be a heavy question, do you see a Gordon Parks in there?
You know what, I think everybody has that potential. I mean, Gordon Parks used his camera as a weapon, as a lens, and you know, from his perspective, gosh, what an amazing gift society has had. I think those are the artists that I love working with, and I think Irvin's work is certainly on par with that. You know, 50 years from now, you know, folks at SCAD will be discussing with their students about the work of alumnus Ervin A. Johnson, and I think they'll definitely use the A in that, and I think it's going to be great. You know, I think that work has the potential. Leandra's work as well, Shakar's work. I mean, I think SCAD is helping creators create what it is that they have to say to the world. And you know, it's great to be able to listen and hear. You know, and so kudos to SCAD for all that, you know, you guys have done to inspire, you know, this next generation of folks out there getting work that's going to eventually be in museums. And like I said, talk about 50 years from now in classes at SCAD. I think it's great.
Alex, do we have time for one or two more questions, or how are we doing?
We may have for one more, Michael.
Okay, let me choose between these two now. Okay, from Emerald Arguelles, if I'm saying it right. Irvin, as a Black artist that discusses the conditions of the Black experience, which is so beautiful. It's one that's met with its hardships. How have you been able to maintain balance while discussing very tough topics? I guess this is one thing we've been talking about in the whole concept, that both of you are doing that in the idea of represent Blackness. So Irvin, do you want to give us a formula for that? Help us.
Um, I haven't really noticed any or felt any hardships that didn't come from me. When I made that first series at Columbia, that I had to overcome hurdles about how I felt about myself and ideas of perception. But I don't feel any hardships as a maker. I don't know if Arnika feels any hardships as someone who exhibits the work. But yeah.
You know, I think creatives have to create. They have to do what it is that they do. And for the gallery, I'm grateful and honored to be able to show what I perceive to be great work. And I am thrilled when others also receive it in that way. Again, to me, it's important to show work that is impactful. And so this idea of Blackness, you know, certainly it's on the topic of a lot of minds right now in this climate that we're in. It's just amazing the statements that collectively we're making together.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm going to sign off. I think that's amazing point. It's great to see you both. Let's do 3 more of these. Final word from Leandra. This reminds me of the importance of centering Blackness as a way to liberate us all. I think that's a great ending. Alex, are we good? Please be in touch. Please go on to the Arnika Dawkins site and the Irvin Johnson, not the athlete, but the artist athlete. And let us know if we can answer any questions. I'm around, Alex Sachs is around. Go to SCAD Fash, amazing exhibitions up now. Derek Adams' exhibition that has to do with Patrick Kelly is super important. And I have to say one more thing, Alex. Can you remind me of the other, another talk that's coming up? I'll send it to you later. Alex,
I'll just say to everybody who's here, first of all, thank you so much to Arnika and to Irvin for a fantastic talk today. And this is part of our Guest and Gusto series. So go to Guest and Gusto, SCAD's website, where you can see other presentations that are going to be happening throughout the fall quarter. But one really exciting one that we've organized for this Thursday, September 24th at 11 a.m. is it's actually in honor of Patrick Kelly's birthday, which is the 24th. And so his former models, and Pat Cleveland, Carol Martin, who loaned to our exhibit, and also Gail O'Neill, who is a local Atlanta journalist, will be in conversation with Carmela Spinelli, who is SCAD's resident fashion historian, to talk about the legacy and life of Patrick Kelly, and for these ladies to talk about personal recollections of working with him. So that also, you can find the Zoom link through Guest and Gusto and also at the SCAD Fash website. So we hope to see you on Thursday at 11 a.m. for that.
Thank you so much, Arnika. Thank you for Irvin. Onward.
Onward.
See
Thank
you
you.
soon, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all for coming.
Bye, guys. Have a good afternoon.